Vincent Rodriguez stood in the doorway of their modest colonial, watching Clara adjust her new Armani blazer in the hallway mirror. The morning light caught the subtle sheen of the fabric, another recent acquisition from her expanding wardrobe. His calloused fingers unconsciously traced the doorframe's grain, wood he'd sanded and stained himself during their first year in this house. "Big presentation today?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Clara had been preparing for weeks, practicing her slides late into the night. "The quarterly review with the executive team," she replied, without turning from the mirror. She smoothed an invisible wrinkle, her manicured fingers lingering on the lapel. "David says if this goes well, there might be talk of expanding my territory." David. Always David these days. Vincent remembered when she used to say Mr. Kellerman with the nervous reverence of a new employee. That was before the promotion 3 months ago, before the monthly business trips, before the late-night strategy calls that pulled her from their bed. "That's great, babe," he offered. The endearment felt hollow on his tongue, a habit more than genuine affection. When had that started? Clara turned from the mirror, and for a moment, Vincent saw the woman he'd married 18 years ago, the determined night school student with dreams bigger than her receptionist's salary could afford. They'd met in that dingy community college classroom, both exhausted from full days of work, both hungry for something more. He was already apprenticing with Kowalski Construction. She was answering phones at a dental office and stealing moments to study between appointments. "What about you?" she asked, her question pulling him back. "Isn't today when they announced the infrastructure project lead?" "Yeah," he responded, shifting his weight, steel-toed boots solid against the hardwood he'd installed himself. "Jerry thinks I've got a good shot at foreman. That's wonderful," she said, but her eyes had already drifted to her phone, thumb scrolling through emails. The casual dismissal stung more than outright rejection would have. Vincent thought about the early years, when every small victory was celebrated together. Clara's first promotion to office manager, his journeyman certification, the day they signed the mortgage on this house. They'd made love on an air mattress in the empty master bedroom, promising each other that they'd fill every room with memories. The memories came, just not the ones they'd imagined. The first miscarriage at 8 weeks, the second at 12, the fertility treatments that drained their savings and their hope in equal measure. The silent agreement, never formally discussed, to stop trying. They'd channeled that energy elsewhere, Clara into her MBA, Vincent into mastering every trade skill he could learn. "I should go," Clara announced, grabbing her Louis Vuitton bag, another recent addition. When had her practical target totes become insufficient? "Clara," he called out, something in his voice making her pause at the door. "We need to talk about the spending. The credit card statement." "Not now, Vincent," she cut him off, her tone shifting to the crisp authority she used with subordinates. "I told you, these are investments in my career. Our future. Would you prefer I show up to executive meetings looking like I shop at Walmart?" The words hung between them like a challenge. Vincent, who bought his clothes at Dickies and considered a new Carhartt jacket a splurge, felt the familiar sting of inadequacy. "I just meant we should discuss major purchases. We used to do a lot of things," she interrupted, her voice softening slightly, but her hand remained on the doorknob. "I'll be late tonight." David scheduled a dinner meeting with the Peterson Group. Another dinner meeting. Vincent did the mental math. That made 3 this month, not counting the official travel. He wanted to ask why these meetings couldn't happen during business hours. Wanted to point out that he'd never had a dinner meeting in 20 years of construction work. But the words died in his throat. "I'll leave something in the fridge," he said instead. Clara's heels clicked across the porch he'd rebuilt last summer, each step taking her further into a world where a foreman's salary was pocket change, where David Kellerman's Harvard MBA opened doors that Vincent's calloused hands could only build. Alone in the house, Vincent walked through rooms that bore his fingerprints on every surface. The kitchen cabinets he'd custom-built to Clara's specifications. The bathroom he'd retiled during a brutal heat wave, sweating through the precise work while Clara brought him glasses of lemonade and praised his attention to detail. The home office where she now conducted late-night video calls behind closed doors. He paused at her desk, laptop closed but not shut down, the soft hum of the fan indicating she'd rushed out again. The screensaver would kick in soon, but for now, the last window she'd viewed remained visible. An email thread he didn't mean to read but couldn't look away from once he saw David's name. Can't wait for Seattle next week. The suite at the Four Seasons has an incredible view. We'll have plenty of time to review the Gray proposal and celebrate properly. Clara's response sat below it. Looking forward to it. V doesn't suspect anything about the extended trip. Monsieur Vincent. Reduced to an initial, an obstacle to manage. His phone buzzed. Jerry confirming he'd gotten the foreman position. $85,000 a year, the most money Vincent had ever made. He'd planned to surprise Clara tonight, maybe suggest she could finally slow down, pursue that pottery studio she used to dream about. The words from their last argument echoed. If you can't handle having an ambitious wife, maybe you should find someone who'll be content baking cookies. In his workshop behind the garage, Vincent ran his hands over the bookshelf he'd been crafting for their anniversary next month. Solid oak, dovetailed joints, each shelf custom-measured for Clara's business books. He'd imagined her face when he revealed it, the way she used to look at his handiwork with genuine admiration. Now, staring at the half-finished piece, Vincent wondered when admiration had turned to tolerance. When his craftsmanship became quaint rather than valuable, when David Kellerman's soft hands that had never held a hammer became more appealing than his own scarred fingers that had built their entire life. The wood was solid, properly dried and carefully selected. But even the best lumber could warp under the wrong conditions. Vincent picked up his sandpaper, working the grain with methodical strokes, trying not to think about how some damage went deeper than the surface. I told myself it was just work stress. I had no idea how wrong I was about everything. Vincent's construction background had taught him to read the warning signs, the subtle shift in a foundation, the almost imperceptible crack that preceded catastrophic failure. Over the next month following his promotion to foreman, he found himself applying the same diagnostic eye to his marriage, cataloging anomalies like he used to review blueprints. The first real flag came wrapped in Italian silk. Clara returned from her Seattle trip with a Hermes scarf that probably cost more than their monthly grocery budget. Conference gift, she explained, draping it around her shoulders with practiced elegance. They really went all out for the keynote speakers. Vincent knew construction conferences. The swag was usually branded polo shirts and USB drives, maybe a decent jacket if you were lucky. But he nodded, filing the information away like a measurement that didn't quite match the plans. How was Seattle? He ventured, settling into his recliner while she unpacked. Maybe we could go together sometime. See the Space Needle? Clara's hand stilled for just a moment. Oh, it was nothing special, she replied quickly. Conference rooms all look the same. Airport, hotel, meetings, airport. You wouldn't have enjoyed it. Strange, considering David's email had mentioned a suite with an incredible view. The gifts continued. Artisanal chocolates from San Francisco, client appreciation gift, she'd said. A Mont Blanc pen from Chicago, speaker recognition, she'd claimed. Each explanation delivered with the smooth confidence of someone who'd rehearsed their lines, but Vincent noticed she never quite met his eyes during these presentations. Saturday mornings used to be sacred. Coffee on the porch, planning the weekend's projects, bodies finding each other naturally as the sun climbed higher. But Clara had started scheduling emergency calls that pulled her into her office, door firmly closed, voice dropping to intimate whispers Vincent could hear but not decipher. This particular Saturday, she'd left her phone on the nightstand when she went to shower. The buzz of an incoming text drew Vincent's attention, not snooping, just the natural reflex of checking if something was urgent. The preview notification glowed. Can't wait to see you again. Next week can't come soon enough. DK Vincent stared at the screen until it went dark. DK David Kellerman. The water shut off in the bathroom. He heard Clara's feet on the tile, the rustle of her towel. You got a text, he mentioned when she emerged, keeping his voice neutral. From DK, something about next week. The flush started at her chest, spreading up her neck to her cheeks. Oh, that, she said, snatching the phone. Quarterly projections are due. He's anxious about the Gray account. She typed quickly, deleting, responding. Vincent couldn't tell, but he recognized the defensive hunch of her shoulders. The same posture she'd had when he'd caught her hiding credit card bills in her underwear drawer years ago, back when their financial secrets were about overspending at Target, not $1,000 scarves. Their physical relationship had become another data point in Vincent's growing spreadsheet of concerns. Clara, who used to initiate as often as he did, now treated intimacy like a quarterly obligation. She'd lie still, participating but not present, her mind clearly elsewhere. The moment he finished, she'd head for the shower, scrubbing away his touch with expensive body wash that smelled nothing like the vanilla lotion she'd worn for 17 years. "You okay?" he'd asked last Tuesday, watching her rigid back as she faced away from him in bed, a decorative pillow creating a DMZ down the middle of their California king. "Fine. Just tired," she'd answered. "The Peterson presentation is consuming everything right now. Always a presentation, always a deadline, always David needing something that apparently only Clara could provide." The neighborhood barbecue should have been neutral ground. Vincent flipped burgers while Clara mingled, her new designer sundress drawing compliments from the other wives. He watched her laugh at Tom Gray's jokes, noticed how she touched Linda Patterson's arm while admiring her bracelet, the social choreography she'd learned in her corporate world, gestures that seemed both natural and performed. Then her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, and her entire demeanor shifted. The practiced smile became genuine, her body language relaxing as she stepped away from the crowd, seeking privacy behind their garden shed. Vincent abandoned his post at the grill, circling around the other side of the yard to get closer. Through the slats in the fence, he could see her profile, one hand pressed to her ear, the other gesturing as if the caller could see her. "I miss you too," she said, her voice carrying that throaty quality she used to reserve for their private moments. "No, he doesn't suspect anything." A pause, then a soft laugh. "Yes, I'm being careful. The Peterson thing is the perfect cover." Vincent's chest tightened. He backed away, returning to the grill where Tom was poking at the burgers with concerned authority. "Everything okay, Mark? You look like you've seen a ghost," Tom observed. "Just the smoke," Vincent managed, blinking hard. Wind shifted. When Clara returned, sliding her phone into her pocket with practiced casualness, she kissed his cheek. "A performance for the neighbors. That was Lily," she announced, naming her sister in California. "Mom's having another one of her episodes." Vincent knew Clara's mother had been dead for 3 years. The lie was so bold, so unnecessary that it took his breath away. She could have said it was work, could have maintained the fiction that kept them both comfortable. Instead, she'd chosen a lie that assumed his stupidity, that counted on him not remembering the woman whose funeral they'd attended together, whose eulogy Clara had delivered with tears streaming down her face. The credit card statement arrived the following Thursday, tucked inside a Gray & Associates folder Clara had left on the kitchen counter. Vincent wasn't looking for it. He'd been searching for the warranty paperwork for their dishwasher, but the Visa logo caught his eye. The charges read like a map of deception. The Meridian restaurant appeared twice, both on nights when Clara had claimed to be working late at the office, eating takeout at her desk. The receipts showed dinners for 2, appetizers through dessert, bottles of wine that cost more than Vincent spent on groceries in a week. The timestamps matched perfectly with her emergency overtime texts. There were other charges, too, a day spa in the middle of a Wednesday when she was supposedly in back-to-back meetings, a jewelry store purchase that didn't correspond to any gift he'd received, hotel room charges in the city when she was allegedly at a conference in Boston. Vincent photographed each page with his phone, his hands steady despite the tremor in his chest. He returned the statement to exactly the position he'd found it, angled just so, Clara's coffee ring staining the upper corner. That night, Clara worked late again. Vincent sat in his workshop, staring at the photos on his phone, each charge another crack in the foundation of their marriage. He thought about confronting her, imagined the scene, accusations, denials, tears, promises. But Vincent had learned from construction that you didn't start demolition until you understood the full extent of the damage. He needed help, professional help, the kind that came with documentation and proof that would hold up when the structure finally came down. I knew I was looking at the evidence of my wife's betrayal. What I didn't know was how much worse it was going to get. Vincent approached betrayal like a construction project. Assess the damage, identify the tools needed, create a plan, execute with precision. He spent his lunch breaks researching private investigators on his phone, sitting in his truck outside job sites, careful to clear his browser history afterward. The construction industry had taught him the value of references. You didn't hire a subcontractor based on their Yellow Pages ad. You asked around, checked their previous work, made sure they could deliver what they promised. Private investigators, he discovered, operated on the same principles. Elias Santos came recommended by 3 different online forums for men dealing with infidelity. His office occupied the second floor above Ming's dry cleaning on the east side, a location that suggested discretion rather than flash. Vincent climbed the narrow stairs on a Tuesday afternoon, telling Jerry he had a dentist appointment. Santos looked like a man who'd spent decades observing without being observed. Medium height, medium build, forgettable features that would blend into any crowd. His handshake was firm, his eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Construction?" Santos asked, noting Vincent's Carhartt jacket and work boots. 20 years, Vincent confirmed. "Good. You understand documentation. Building a case is like building a house. Everything needs to be square and level, or it falls apart in court," Santos replied with professional understanding. Vincent laid out his evidence, the credit card statements, the text preview, the overheard phone call. Santos took notes on a legal pad, occasionally asking for clarification. "The business trips with the boss. That's your smoking gun," Santos observed, setting down his pen. "Hotels keep records, security cameras catch everything. The local stuff is harder to prove, but not impossible." He leaned back in his chair. "Full investigation runs $3,000. Half up front, half when I deliver the report. Usually takes 3 to 4 weeks. $3,000. Vincent had it, thanks to his foreman promotion and years of careful saving. Clara managed their main accounts, but Vincent had always kept a separate fund for tools and equipment. Money she considered his to waste on boy toys. "What exactly do I get for that?" Vincent asked. "Comprehensive surveillance during the next business trip, photographic evidence if available, documentation of local meetings, financial forensics if you can provide access to records, and a report that will hold up in court," Santos explained. "I'm a licensed investigator. My testimony is admissible, and I've never had my evidence thrown out." Vincent wrote the check from his equipment account. Santos gave him a receipt and a burner phone. "Only call me on this," Santos instructed. "Your regular phone might be compromised. These cheaters get paranoid, sometimes install tracking apps. I'll text you updates as I get them." While Santos worked, Vincent began his own preparations. He opened a new checking account at a credit union across town, slowly transferring money in small increments, 200 here, 300 there, amounts that looked like cash withdrawals for job materials or tools. Clara never questioned construction expenses. He researched divorce law during breaks at work, sitting in his truck with his phone, learning terms like equitable distribution and marital assets. Their states still recognized adultery as grounds for divorce, which could affect alimony and asset division. The betrayed spouse had advantages, but only with proof. Rebecca Reyes came recommended by his foreman, Jerry, who'd gone through an ugly divorce 5 years prior. "She's a barracuda," Jerry had said with admiration. "Took my ex apart piece by piece when we caught her with the pool boy." Vincent met Reyes at her office after work, still in his construction clothes. She didn't seem to mind the sawdust on his boots or the concrete dust on his jeans. "Tell me everything," she said, and Vincent did. Reyes took notes, occasionally asking pointed questions. When he mentioned the private investigator, she nodded approvingly. "Santos is good. His reports are bulletproof," she confirmed. "Once we have that, we can file immediately." The element of surprise is crucial, prevents them from hiding assets or crafting counter-narratives. "What about the house?" Vincent asked. "You renovated it yourself? Have receipts? Before marriage or after?" she inquired. "After, but I did all the work. Have photos of everything, permits, receipts," he answered. "Good. That strengthens your claim." "The adultery helps too," Judges here don't look kindly on spouses who betray the marriage contract, especially when marital assets funded the affair, she explained with satisfaction. The next 3 weeks passed in a surreal fog. Clara continued her routine: late meetings, weekend emails, monthly trip to Boston with David. She'd grown bolder, or maybe just careless. The effort to hide the affair seemed to be exhausting her. She barely maintained conversation at dinner, lost in her phone, occasionally smiling at messages she didn't share. Vincent played his part, the oblivious husband, focused on work, grateful for the overtime his position allowed. He mentioned the new municipal project starting next month, how it would mean longer hours but better pay. Clara barely looked up from her laptop. "That's nice, honey," she murmured absently. The endearment was automatic, meaningless. Vincent wondered when they'd become strangers sharing a house, when their conversations had reduced to logistics and lies. The burner phone buzzed while Vincent was installing crown molding in a client's dining room. Santos had sent a simple message. "Package ready. Can meet tonight." They met at a diner off the interstate, the kind of place where no one looked twice at two men having coffee at 9 p.m. Santos slid a manila envelope across the table, thick with documentation. "It's worse than you thought," Santos said quietly. Vincent opened the envelope, his hands steady despite the churning in his gut. The first photo showed Clara entering the Marriott in Boston with David, his hand on the small of her back. The timestamp read 3:47 p.m. when she was supposedly in an all-day vendor meeting. The next photos progressed like a flipbook of betrayal. Clara and David at dinner, her head thrown back in laughter, David's hand covering hers across a table. The two of them in a hotel bar, Clara sitting so close she was practically in his lap. Entering his apartment building on 3 different occasions when she'd claimed to be at the office. "There's more," Santos indicated, pointing to the printed pages behind the photos. Hotel receipts showed room service charges for champagne and strawberries. A receipt from Tiffany's for a tennis bracelet. Vincent recognized it as the one Clara claimed her company had given her for landing the Peterson account. David's credit card statements, obtained through means Santos didn't elaborate on, showed charges that mirrored Clara's mysterious purchases. The most damaging evidence came from David's own carelessness. His Instagram account, set to public, featured photos from business trips that inadvertently captured Clara's reflection in windows, her distinctive handbag on restaurant tables, her shoes visible under a hotel table. In one photo from a Miami conference, David had posted a sunrise beach photo with the caption, "Perfect morning." Clara's footprints were clearly visible in the sand beside his. "There's something else," Santos added, pulling out a final document. "David Kellerman is married." Vincent felt the air leave his lungs. The document was a wedding announcement from 8 years ago. David Kellerman and Patricia Gray, daughter of Judge Harold Gray. 2 kids, a house in Westchester. The perfect corporate family. "Does his wife know?" Vincent asked. "Unknown. But she's got more to lose than you do," Santos replied. "Judge Gray is old school, family values, moral standings. This would destroy David's standing in those circles." Vincent stared at the evidence spread across the sticky diner table. Months of lies documented in painful detail. The sheer scope of the deception was breathtaking. It wasn't just the intimacy. It was the elaborate construction of an entirely false life, complete with cover stories, fake receipts, and calculated misdirection. "What do you want to do with this?" Santos asked. Vincent gathered the documents carefully, returning them to the envelope. "What I do best," he said firmly. "Build something that will last." The next morning, Vincent delivered the entire package to Rebecca Reyes. She reviewed each piece with professional satisfaction. "This is a slam dunk, Mr. Rodriguez," she declared. "With this evidence, we can protect your assets, potentially claim damages for emotional distress, and ensure she doesn't see a penny of alimony. When do you want to file?" Vincent thought about the bookshelf in his workshop, still unfinished. About 18 years of marriage reduced to surveillance photos and credit card receipts. About David Kellerman's soft hands on his wife's body. "Prepare everything," he instructed. "But I'll tell you when to file. I want to choose my moment." Reyes smiled, recognizing the calm fury in his voice. "The best revenge is served with proper documentation," she agreed. We'll be ready when you are. I had everything I needed to destroy her. I just had to wait for the perfect moment to strike. Rain hammered against the windows as Vincent sat in his living room, blueprints for the municipal project spread across the coffee table. He'd been reviewing foundation specifications when he heard Clara's key in the lock. 7:43 p.m. on a Thursday, earlier than usual for her late meetings. The door opened and Clara entered, shaking rain from her umbrella. But she wasn't alone. David Kellerman followed, closing the door behind him with the casual confidence of someone who belonged there. Vincent's hands stilled on the blueprints. He looked up slowly, taking in David's appearance, the tailored suit that probably cost more than Vincent made in a month, the Italian leather shoes leaving wet prints on the hardwood Vincent had installed, the entitled smirk of a man who'd never faced a real fight in his life. "Vincent," Clara said, her voice steady, businesslike. "We need to talk." She didn't even have the decency to look nervous. Instead, she stood beside David with the same poised confidence she used in board meetings. Rain droplets still glistening on her Burberry trench coat. "I want a divorce," she announced, as if declaring the quarterly earnings were down. Vincent leaned back in his chair, studying them both. David's hand rested possessively on Clara's lower back, not even trying to hide it anymore. "The arrogance was breathtaking, I see," Vincent said quietly. "And you brought him here to, what, supervise?" David stepped forward, surveying the living room with obvious disdain, the worn leather furniture, the modestly sized TV, the photos of Clara and Vincent from better times still hanging on the walls. "Frankly, Vincent," David said, his voice carrying the prep school condescension that men like him never quite outgrew, "Clara deserves better than a man who smells like sawdust and sweat. She's executive material and you're—" He gestured vaguely. "This." The insult hung in the air like a challenge. Vincent felt 18 years of careful control, of measured responses, of turning the other cheek, crystallize into something harder than concrete. But not yet. Not quite yet. Clara produced a manila folder from her bag, pre-drafted divorce papers, no doubt prepared by David's attorney. She set them on the coffee table with crisp efficiency, covering Vincent's blueprints. "I've been more than fair," she declared, flipping to tagged pages. "You'll keep your truck and your tools. I'll take the house. My salary has been paying most of the mortgage anyway. And given the disparity in our incomes, you'll pay alimony. Standard support for a marriage of this length?" "Standard," Vincent repeated, tasting the word. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," Clara continued. "You have no leverage here. No prenup, no grounds for contesting. Sign the papers, and we can all move on with our lives." Vincent laughed then, a low, rumbling sound that started in his chest and rolled out like thunder. Both Clara and David took an involuntary step back. "No leverage," Vincent said, standing slowly. His construction boots made him 3 inches taller than David, broader by half. "That's interesting." He walked to his desk, a solid oak piece he'd built himself, and retrieved 2 manila envelopes from the drawer. The first he tossed onto the coffee table next to Clara's papers. "Funny thing about leverage," he said conversationally. "Sometimes it's just about who files first." Clara snatched the envelope, her confidence wavering as she pulled out Rebecca Reyes's divorce petition, filed that morning at 8 a.m. with the county clerk. "What is this?" Her voice pitched higher, the executive composure cracking. "That's what a real divorce filing looks like," Vincent explained. "Adultery as grounds. Full documentation provided to the court." He hefted the second envelope. "Which brings us to this." Clara's face drained of color as she recognized the investigator's report. Her hands shook as she flipped through the photographs, the hotel entrances, the intimate dinners, David's hand on her body in places Vincent used to touch. "You had me followed?" she gasped, the outrage in her voice almost comical. "I had the truth documented," Vincent corrected. "Every hotel, every dinner, every lie. Did you really think I was that stupid? That I wouldn't notice the charges, the gifts, the sudden business trips?" David tried to edge toward the door, but Vincent shifted, blocking his path with the casual authority of a man who'd spent 20 years moving heavy objects. "Going somewhere, David?" Vincent asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "We're not done here." "This is between you and Clara," David started. "No," Vincent interrupted, stepping closer, close enough that David could probably smell the honest sweat he'd mocked moments ago. You came into my house. You f***ed my wife. You insulted my work, my life, everything I've built with these hands. He held up his calloused palms, scarred from decades of labor. So this is very much between us. The punch came from nowhere, or seemed to, if you didn't know how to read Vincent's body language, the subtle shift in weight that preceded violence. 20 years of swinging hammers had given him perfect economy of motion. The right cross connected with David's jaw with a sound like a 2x4 snapping. David went down hard, his expensive suit offering no protection against physics. He tried to get up, and Vincent helped him along with a hook to the soft belly that too many business dinners had created. David collapsed again, retching on the hardwood floor, his dignity pooling around him like rainwater. "Vincent, stop!" Clara screamed, dropping to her knees beside David. "I'll call the police." "Go ahead," Vincent responded, pulling out his phone to show her the recording app that had been running since they'd walked in. "I've got your boyfriend on tape insulting me in my own home, announcing your affair. I'm just defending myself against a home invader who came here to threaten me." Clara's face cycled through emotions. Rage, fear, desperation, and finally, the one Vincent had been waiting for. Defeat. "Please," she pleaded, her voice small now, nothing like the executive who'd walked in 10 minutes ago. "We can work this out. Counseling, therapy. I made a mistake." "No," Vincent said firmly, his voice as solid as foundation concrete. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. This was a choice. Hundreds of choices every day for months." David groaned from the floor, trying to sit up. His nose was bleeding, crimson drops staining his white shirt like evidence markers. "There's more," Vincent continued, almost conversationally. "I sent copies of everything to Gray and Associates this morning. HR, legal, and the entire board of directors. Seems using company funds for personal travel is a fireable offense. Who knew?" Clara's face went white. "You didn't," she whispered. "Check your email," he suggested. She fumbled for her phone, fingers shaking. Vincent watched her face crumble as she read the automated response from HR acknowledging receipt of his complaint. "Oh, and David?" Vincent turned to the man still struggling on his floor. "Your wife Patricia got a copy too. Sent it certified mail to your Westchester house. Should arrive tomorrow if it hasn't already." David's eyes widened in pure terror. "Patricia doesn't— You can't!" he sputtered. "I can and I did," Vincent stated. "Judge Gray's daughter, right? I bet she's got excellent lawyers. Probably already freezing your accounts." Vincent walked to the front door, opened it wide despite the rain. "Get out of my house, both of you," he commanded. Clara stood on shaking legs, mascara running in black streams down her cheeks. "Vincent, please." 18 years, she began. "Meant nothing to you," he cut her off. "You destroyed them for what? Better restaurants? A corner office? A man with soft hands who couldn't build a birdhouse if his life depended on it?" She helped David to his feet, his weight draped over her designer-clad shoulders. At the doorway, she turned back once more. "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked desperately. Vincent shrugged. "David probably has a nice apartment." "Oh, wait, his wife's lawyers are probably already changing those locks. Better call that sister of yours, you know, the one whose mother is having episodes 3 years after dying." The reference to her barbecue lie hit home. Clara flinched, realizing just how much Vincent had known, how long he'd been planning this moment. "Your things will be in the driveway tomorrow," he added. "Take them or they go to Goodwill." He closed the door on them, listening to their stumbling footsteps on the porch he'd built, the car doors slamming, the engine starting. Through the window, he watched David's BMW pull away, taillights disappearing into the rain. Vincent looked around his living room, their living room once upon a time. The coffee table still held 2 sets of divorce papers. He picked up Clara's version with its demands for alimony and the house and fed it into the fireplace, watching legal lies turn to ash. Tomorrow there would be lawyers and mediators and paperwork. But tonight, Vincent Rodriguez stood in the house he'd built, on the foundation he'd poured, surrounded by the work of his calloused hands. For the first time in months, it felt like home, I thought watching her face crumble would be the end of it. But the real justice was just getting started. 6 months later, Vincent stood on the skeleton frame of what would become a 3-story custom home, checking measurements against his plans. The September sun warmed his back as he worked, and from this height he could see across the entire development, 12 lots, all contracted to Rodriguez Construction. His phone buzzed. Rebecca Reyes's name appeared on the screen. "Divorce is finalized," she announced without preamble. "Signed by the judge this morning." Vincent set down his level, taking a moment to absorb the news. "Terms?" he asked. "Everything we asked for," she confirmed. "Clara gets her car and personal belongings. You keep the house, all retirement accounts, and she pays you $30,000 in damages for emotional distress." The adultery evidence was insurmountable. $30,000 seed money that had helped launch Rodriguez Construction from a soul. Proprietorship to a legitimate company with 3 employees and a waiting list of clients. Stretching into next year. "What about her job?" he inquired. "Terminated for cause 6 months ago, as you know. No severance, no references," Reyes reminded him. "Last I heard, she's working at a small accounting firm in Riverside, making about $40,000 a year, less than half her Gray and Associates' salary." Vincent felt no satisfaction in that, just a hollow acknowledgement of consequences meeting actions. After ending the call, Vincent descended the ladder and found his crew gathering for lunch. Tom and Miguel, skilled framers he'd stolen from his old company with better pay and profit sharing. Sarah, a young carpenter's apprentice who reminded him of himself 20 years ago, hungry to learn, willing to work, hands already developing the calluses that marked their trade. "Boss, you see this?" Tom called out, holding up his phone, showing a news article from the business section. "David Kellerman, former Gray and Associates executive, files for bankruptcy," the headline read. Vincent skimmed the article. Patricia Kellerman had taken David for everything in their divorce: the Westchester house, the investment accounts, custody of their children. Her father, Judge Gray, had ensured David's reputation was thoroughly destroyed in their social circles. No firm would touch him. He'd been reduced to contract consulting work, living in a studio apartment in Newark. "Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy," Miguel commented, biting into his sandwich. Vincent said nothing, pocketing his phone. David Kellerman was a ghost from another life, no more relevant to his present than the phantom pain from an old injury. The house felt different now. Vincent had kept it, not out of sentiment, but practicality. The mortgage was nearly paid off, and every improvement carried his sweat equity. He'd donated Clara's abandoned belongings to charity, repainted the master bedroom, replaced the California King with a queen that didn't dominate the space. The bookshelf he'd been building for their anniversary found its way to the women's shelter downtown, along with a check from his first Rodriguez Construction profit. The director had been grateful. Apparently, they needed furniture that could withstand heavy use, and Vincent's craftsmanship was built to last generations. His dating life remained purposefully simple. Coffee with Sarah from the hardware store had evolved into occasional dinners, but she understood his pace, respected his need to rebuild trust as carefully as he'd rebuild a damaged foundation. She had her own business, a small garden center, and appreciated both his work ethic and his reluctance to rush into anything permanent. "I like that you take your time," she'd said last week, watching him precisely measure wood for her store's new shelving. Careful work lasts longer. She was right, of course. Vincent had learned the hard way that anything built too quickly, without proper foundation work, would eventually collapse. The surprising satisfaction came from unexpected sources. Former clients of David's reached out, having heard about Vincent's company through the peculiar grapevine of suburban scandal. They hired him for renovations, praising his professionalism while sharing whispered updates about David's downfall. "He's living in Newark now," Mrs. Patterson had mentioned while Vincent installed her new kitchen cabinets. Patricia got everything, even his country club membership. "I heard he tried to get a job at Goldman, but Patricia's father made some calls." Vincent had simply nodded, focusing on ensuring the cabinet doors hung perfectly level. Other people's drama was just background noise now. Clara had tried reaching out 3 times. The first was a letter, forwarded through Rebecca Reyes, claiming she'd made a terrible mistake, that David had manipulated her, that 18 years meant something. Vincent had read it once, then filed it with the divorce papers, documentation to keep, but not to dwell on. The second was a voicemail left at 2 a.m. on a Saturday, her voice slurred with whine and regret. "Vincent, I messed up. I messed everything up. He promised me so much, and I believed him. I threw away everything real for corporate bull and a man who ran the moment things got hard. Please, just talk to me." Vincent had deleted it, but not before saving a copy for his lawyer, just in case. The third attempt was in person. She'd shown up at one of his job sites, looking diminished in a way that had nothing to do with her obvious weight loss or the drugstore dye job attempting to cover gray roots. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by off-the-rack professional wear that didn't quite fit right. "5 minutes," she'd pleaded. "You owe me that. I owe you nothing." Vincent had continued working, installing hurricane ties on roof joists. "You made your choices. I was an idiot. David promised me a different life, and you got it." Vincent climbed down from his ladder to face her directly. "Just not the one you expected." She'd left then, shoulders shaking with what might have been tears. Vincent had returned to his work. Some foundations, once cracked, could never be properly repaired. It was better to clear the ground and start fresh. The business thrived on Vincent's reputation for honest work and fair dealing. His clients appreciated that he showed up when promised, finished on schedule, and never padded invoices. Word spread the way it always did in construction, one satisfied customer telling another, "Suburban Network's carrying recommendations across dinner parties and school pickup lines. You're the one whose ex-wife ran off with that corporate guy who went bankrupt, right?" A new client had asked with the tactless curiosity of the wealthy. "That's ancient history," Vincent had replied, steering the conversation back to their kitchen renovation plans. But he knew the story added to his mystique, the betrayed husband who'd risen above, who'd built something solid from the wreckage. It was a narrative his clients could understand, a moral framework that made them trust him with their homes. Evenings were his own now. No more waiting for Clara to come home from late meetings, no more pretending not to notice perfume that wasn't hers or his. He worked in his shop when he wanted, watched baseball without apology, cooked simple meals that satisfied him without requiring Instagram documentation. The house was quiet, but not lonely. Vincent had learned the difference between solitude and abandonment. Solitude was chosen, comfortable, productive. Abandonment was what Clara had done, to their marriage, to their vows, to the life they'd built board by board and brick by brick. On this particular evening, 6 months after the confrontation that ended everything, Vincent sat on his front porch with a beer and his laptop, reviewing proposals for the Riverside development. Rodriguez Construction had been invited to bid on the entire project, 40 homes over 2 years. It would mean hiring more crew, buying better equipment, maybe even opening a proper office instead of running everything from his kitchen table. His phone buzzed. Sarah texting about dinner Saturday. Her place, she was attempting Italian. "Fair warning," she'd written. "My cooking isn't quite restaurant quality." "I prefer home cooking," Vincent replied, meaning it. The sun set over his neighborhood, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Other families were settling into their evening routines, kids being called in from play, grills firing up for dinner, couples walking dogs along the sidewalk he'd helped pour 3 summers ago. Vincent thought about Clara occasionally, wondered if she was happy in her diminished life, if she'd found what she'd been looking for in conference rooms and corporate climbing. He thought about David, too. Imagined him in his Newark studio, eating takeout alone, wondering how he'd lost everything to a man who smelled like sawdust and sweat. But mostly, Vincent thought about tomorrow. The Riverside project to bid on, the oak lumber being delivered for a custom entertainment center, teaching Sarah's nephew basic carpentry next weekend, dinner with Sarah on Saturday. He'd built his life once on shifting ground, trusting someone else with the blueprints. That structure had collapsed, as structures built on bad foundations always did. But a skilled craftsman could always build again. Better this time on ground he'd tested himself, with materials he trusted, creating something that would last. The porch light clicked on automatically, responding to the deepening dusk. Vincent closed his laptop and headed inside to his quiet, honest house. Tomorrow would be another day of good work, clean money, and the satisfaction of creating something solid in a world full of facades. Some foundations, once cracked, could never be properly repaired. But a skilled craftsman could always build something better from the ground up, and Vincent Rodriguez was a very skilled craftsman indeed. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.